about girls' education worldwide and a girl named Malala Yousafzai, who is one of the biggest voices behind girls' education worldwide. It's astonishing that over 60 million girls are missing out on an education, says the United Nations. They also say that 31 million primary-age schoolgirls do not have access to education around the world. There are many reasons for this. For example, girls worldwide often have to go to work early, get married younger, have to care for siblings or older grandparents. Oftentimes they receive an unequal share of the household work, which means that they have longer hours at home and less time to go to school or do homework. Girls face violence preventing them from going to school as well. That can be physical, even sexual violence. So there are many reasons for this low education rate for girls, as I've mentioned. And why is this important? Well, for us in the United States, it may be quite obvious. But investing in girls is the right and smart thing to do. And this is said by many agencies such as the World Bank, the UN Women, UNICEF, and other agencies worldwide. Here are some convincing facts. A child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to survive past the age of 5. The risk of maternal death is 2.7 times higher among women with no education than among women with more than 12 years of education. When girls and women have income because they had an education, they reinvest 90% of that into the family. So we've seen such progress through the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UN Millennium Development Goals, and who've had higher targets of increasing equality between girls and boys' education. However, freedom from all forms of discrimination against a child remains partially fulfilled. But, as some of you may know, there's one person in particular, Malala Yousafzai, who's really advocating for girls' education. How many of you are familiar with Malala? Great, looks like almost everyone here. How many of you have read her book, I Am Malala, her autobiography? How many of you have seen the film that came out recently? It's a biography on her called He Named Me Malala. He called me her. Okay, well today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Malala's story. Some of it you may not have known, as I had not known some of the specifics, and what you can do to support the girl child and girls' education worldwide. For example, in 1997, Malala was born, so about 18 years ago, in the Swat Valley of northwest Pakistan. Her father was an advocate for girls' education and education in general. He ran a school near their house. And he was also outspoken against the Taliban efforts. And in about 2009, this is when the Taliban had really come into the Swat Valley and there was a large military surge. And their hold on the valley really intensified. In January of that year, Malala had started a blog. And you may wonder how this child in the Swat Valley had started a blog on the BBC. And that's because someone in the BBC Urdu, which is the Pakistan BBC channel, had wanted to do a blog about what it was like to live in this valley under Taliban rule. And so they reached out to her father, this known advocate in education, and he couldn't find anyone to write the blog because they would fear being killed or having threats. So he offered his own daughter to write. Now, Malala wrote in January, the girls were not too excited about vacations because they knew if the Taliban implemented their edict, which is banning girls' education, they would not be able to come to school again. I am of the view that the school one day reopened, but while leaving it, I looked at the building as if I would not come here again. Much of her blog talked about how she was no longer allowed to wear bright dresses because of fear of reprisal from the Taliban. And eventually her and her family were kicked out of the valley because of the Pakistan military's surge against the Taliban. During this time also the New York Times came out with a documentary and revealed that she was the author of the BBC blog. and in which case she started to receive a lot of death threats. So tragically, the threats were carried out on October 12th of 2012, in which a masked gunman came onto her school bus and asked for her name, who is Malala, shot her, and the bullet went past her eyebrow into her head and her shoulder. It took her about 4 months to recover, and she was sent to a hospital in the UK, in which case there was a lot of protests and support for her across Pakistan. Over 2 million people signed the Right to Education petition, in which the National Assembly in Pakistan ratified their first free compulsory education bill. And then in December of 2014, she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, and she said that that was on behalf of children worldwide, and that she would continue to work for children's education so everyone can go to school. So she said, "I don't want to be thought of as the girl who was shot by the Taliban, but the girl who fought for education. This is the cause to which I devote my life." So she started a fund. She's been on many TV programs talking about her fund to fight for girls' education, to make sure that there's advocacy, working with programs like the United Nations. And she also has put out a book with the Brookings Institute, which I gave you some information that you can download and read about ways to help children through her fund and other UN agencies, like making schools affordable, addressing girls' health, reducing the time and distance it takes for them to go to school so it's safer, making schools more girl-friendly, sustaining education during emergencies, and so forth. And so her fund has helped many women in Kenya, Nigeria, and most recently Syrian refugees to get access to education. Also, her documentary just came out this month, which I gave you information on, which you can see that as well. And if you're someone who wants to focus more on education for girls locally, there's a really great organization called the American Association of University Women, AAUW, who works with girls in STEM and in education and equal rights in the United States. So I'll just leave you with a quick thought from Malala. This award is not just for me, it's for those forgotten children who want education. It is for those frightened children who want peace. It is for those voiceless children who want change. I am here to stand up for their rights, to raise their voice. It is not time to pity them, it is time to take action. Thank you.